Secretary Moniz, thank you for joining me today.
It's a pleasure, Luiza.
Thank you. So you've been meeting with your counterparts from Mexico, from Canada, over and over again. What are you working toward? What is your goal here for North America?
Well, first of all, let me say that the Leaders Summit in 2014 directed the energy ministers to get together trilaterally. We did that in 2014, and we have now met something like 6 times since then. This all stems from the idea that the energy scene in North America has obviously changed very dramatically. Canada and the United States, with our increased production of energy, Mexico with its energy reforms, and so the leaders viewed that particularly with Paris on the horizon, that our working together for a clean energy future was just a tremendous opportunity. And so we have done that. We are working to increase even more the integration of our energy systems across, well, for the United States, across both borders. So we are working together as well in the post-Paris time period. We can discuss many of the directions, including one where all 3 countries are charter members of what's called Mission Innovation, in which we will work together literally to create more investment opportunities for clean energy innovation that will meet our economic and environmental and security goals together.
So now as these 3 leaders are meeting once again, what are you hoping that will come out of this meeting that will leverage the work that you've been doing already in the lead up here?
Well, first of all, again, all 3 leaders, and of course since the last summit, the government in Canada has changed, but all 3 leaders really have a very strong commitment to the road from Paris, shall we say, where we all have to meet our goals. So I think in the summit you'll see a number of the energy activities that we have been working on highlighted. For one thing, what we've done is, since our first meeting trilaterally at the end of 2014, we have produced a integrated energy map, if you like, of North America, which we did not have before.
And what is this for? Is this to figure out where we need more infrastructure? Is that the goal here?
So it will be a foundation, yes, for looking at how we can have even more integration of our energy infrastructure. Certainly with regard to the United States and Canada, we already have a significant integration of our electricity system, for example, and things like Quebec Hydro can play a big role, for example, in terms of how the United States looks at its clean energy future. As I said earlier, Mexico, of course, with its energy reforms in the hydrocarbon sector, in the electricity sector, is also very committed. So we see next week that the leaders, I think, will reinforce our clean energy integration. They will talk about how, for example, renewables can play a role for all 3 countries. And as we know, renewables often have to be transported over a long distance, and the electricity flows do not recognize either state or national borders. So getting that integration of our infrastructure to allow us all to maximize our clean energy resources will certainly be an important focus.
But what is the way forward on that? Every time there's an attempt to upgrade the grid, the electricity infrastructure, there are people on the ground who don't want it in their backyard. They're activists. It's not just activism against fossil fuel infrastructure, but infrastructure in general. So how do you go forward to actually build it out?
Well, infrastructure as you say, of all types, frankly, always runs into some challenges, but there's no doubt that we need to build out this infrastructure. We have a number of projects, shall we say, warming up in the oven, both with Canada and with Mexico for that integration. I think we will see progress on that certainly in the next months and the next year. In the United States, we have some additional authorities that we have exercised, actually. For example, one example would be infrastructure to take wind from our Oklahoma Panhandle over to Tennessee to provide some wind resource for the Southeast. So those are the kinds of projects that we will do. And of course, with Canada, right now we have a number of very active proposals which are well along in terms of, again, tapping into Canada's immense hydro resource.
Do you think hydroelectricity then should be considered a renewable resource for states in the United States as they look to diversify their renewable energy portfolios?
Well, yes, certainly. I mean, hydro is, of course, a very low carbon source. There are environmental issues to manage in terms of tapping hydro resources. We have that in the United States, in our Northwest, for example. But look, we are going to need, our view is we need every low carbon resource in our integrated solutions to low carbon. I remind you, in Paris, all three of our countries made what I would call comparable commitments in terms of carbon emission reductions in the 10 to 15 year time frame. However, and that's very important, and we all have plans to meet our commitments. However, beyond that 10 to 15 year time frame, we have to up our ambition. We're going to need to keep squeezing down on carbon emissions towards a very deep decarbonization by mid-century and beyond. So that's where a diverse program of deploying clean technologies now, building the infrastructure to do it, but also focusing on the innovation agenda for potentially transformational energy technologies that can support the deep decarbonization. That's all part of our requirements. It's all part of the agenda that we see with our Canadian and Mexican partners.
We were talking about infrastructure, and obviously the big infrastructure issue for so many years between Canada and the U.S. was the proposed Keystone XL pipeline from the oil sands. That was rejected in part based on a climate test. Do you think there'll be a climate test now going forward for all cross-border energy infrastructure between Canada and the U.S.? Well,
look, we're all committed to a low carbon future. So all that we do is going to be guided, I think, by how we're going to meet that. Now, that does not mean that, and we've said so clearly, our President Obama has said quite clearly, this does not mean that suddenly fossil fuels are not going to be part of the energy mix. So we certainly will do that. And in particular, I might say, natural gas has been a tremendous part of the United States' major reduction in CO2 emissions because, frankly, largely driven by the market, given the low price of natural gas in the United States and Canada, it has had an enormous displacement of coal. So we have actually lowered our carbon emissions by increasing our natural gas production.
Mm-hmm. And there's a new government in Ottawa. There's a new government in Alberta. They're both taking steps on the climate agenda. Mm-hmm. Does that change the perception here in Washington at all of Canadian oil that had been branded dirty oil? Are these steps being taken seriously here?
Well, first of all, in Canada, as you say, both provincial and national, I would just characterize them as very strong steps and a very, very strong commitment. So that's really positive. And I think, you know, we had a very good cooperation with the previous government. Clearly, the commitment is, you know, very, very strong with the Trudeau government. I also might say that I think, and I witnessed it, that I think President Obama and Prime Minister Trudeau also have a very good personal relationship.
And what difference does that make? Does that have any impact on moving this agenda forward?
Oh, yes, it does, because I think it really just opens up the channels for us to collaborate, to coordinate. I might say that one should not question the commitment of Mexico and the United States to work with Canada when you consider that the Mexican energy minister and I went to Winnipeg in February when it was minus 30 degrees. I mean, that shows commitment, and I think it's really part of just a very easy relationship that we have right now.
I heard you went to a hockey game.
We went to see the Boston Bruins, and I don't want to boast about the easy win that Boston.
I heard there was trash talk.
Okay. There was a little bit of, let's say, good-natured rivalry. And,
so what are the concrete things that these three countries can do together? Will there be a plan, a joint plan on methane, for example? What are the kinds of things that you can do?
So we are committed, all three countries, to working together in terms of methane emission reduction, as you said. Methane is a very powerful greenhouse gas, and frankly, there's economic incentive to help control methane emissions. We are going to be looking at the ideas of how we can reinforce security of our energy system, grids, for example. So part of the grid work is, as we discussed earlier, let's say moving renewables over large distances. But that isn't the only criterion that we will use as we evaluate infrastructure projects nationally or in this international collaboration. So, for example, resilience of our systems against extreme weather, against cyber threats, against physical threats, those are areas, particularly given the increasing integration of our grids, that's a common concern. That's, for example, an area to work at. Let me also say that all three countries have been very, very active in what's called the Clean Energy Ministerial. We just had a meeting on that in San Francisco with 23 countries plus the EU. I mention that because we have taken some of our work, for example, on industrial energy efficiency, to take a leadership role now in what is effectively a global push towards increasing industrial energy efficiency. We have, as I mentioned earlier, we have made tremendous progress, and you can look at the website in terms of mapping the energy infrastructures of all three countries. We are committed. We committed just a few weeks ago in San Francisco to looking at cooling as one of the major challenges going forward. That's a particularly large challenge.
Cooling what?
Air conditioning.
Okay.
And especially for hot climates around the world, this is a major issue.
And what about the North American auto industry? Canada and the U.S. have been agreeing on emission standards for cars and trucks. What else can you harmonize there when it comes to transportation?
Well, first of all, the whole issue of harmonizing standards is very important throughout the energy sector, and we are working hard at that, including appliances and the like. In terms of autos, having common efficiency standards, for example, really helps. Again, what is again our rather integrated industries, our supply chains across the border. I might say that we can see a lot of change, of course, occurring as we increase the efficiency of our internal combustion engine vehicles. At the same time, and certainly in both countries, we are working hard in terms of the storage technologies for electric vehicles. We are working hard on alternative liquid fuels, biofuels. We're also working, by the way, on some what some would term perhaps moonshot kinds of technologies, like the conversion of sunlight, carbon dioxide, and water to fuels for vehicles. So it's multi-pronged, but the issue of clean vehicles, and I might add to that, not just clean automobiles, but heavy trucks, for example, is going to be a critical direction for us to go in. We have a strong manufacturing sector, actually in all three countries, for automobiles. So this again will be an area of that's ripe for collaboration.
So in Canada, there's a lot of talk about a potential carbon tax, a national carbon tax. What do you see? Could you ever imagine a North American carbon tax? What is the market piece here to maintain fair competition for businesses in North America wide? What is the answer? Could there be North American cap and trade, a single tax, a market for offsets? Are you thinking about that at all?
Well, first of all, I think both in Canada and the United States, what we are seeing is state, province, regional approaches. The United States, for example, the Northeast has the RGGI program, and we see other programs in the West Coast, California, et cetera, for carbon pricing. I personally believe that while our Congress apparently is not yet ready for that step, I actually believe that eventually that will be the direction that we go in, a simple kind of economy-wide carbon pricing. Canada, I won't speak for Canada, but I can imagine a similar thing happening there. When that does happen, again, staying in sync, I think, will be extremely important. Our economies are so integrated that having any significant divergence just will create barriers to commerce. So I think I'm optimistic that we will get there in some time. We will continue to implement the President's Climate Action Plan based upon existing authorities.
Will that exist after this President leaves office? Will those commitments endure?
Well, many of those commitments are put now into things like rules that require an extensive process to put into place and an extensive process to change. So a lot of these are going to be in place. You mentioned the vehicles, the so-called CAFE standards. That goes out right now to 2025 by agreement with the auto companies. That's all in place. There will be a review in the United States in the 2017-2018 time period.
So just too hard to change the rules overnight.
Yeah, exactly. And the same is true with, at Department of Energy, we have responsibility for appliance efficiency standards, for example. Every one of those rules has gone through an extended formal process required, including required cost-benefit analyses. They have public comment. We often, in fact, respond to those comments by changing the final rule from the proposal to meet good comments that have come in. If you want to change that rule, you need to go literally through the entire process again to change it in either direction. So a lot of this, I think, is going to be there. But the important thing is, as I said, it's based on a cost-benefit analysis. And the rule cannot go into effect unless it demonstrates that it is economically good for the consumer and for the economy. So these are common sense things that are moving us towards clean energy, but doing so on a completely sound economic basis.
So there's reason to be optimistic from your perspective.
As a physicist, I'm always optimistic.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.